Hello, my name is Peter Veenstra and I'm the Director of Lola Landscape Architects, based in Rotterdam and Shenzhen.
Hello everybody, my name is Julian Restrepo and I'm one of the partners of Taller Architects.
Hello all, hope you're having a lovely day. We look forward to sharing our vision with you. My name is Jason Hilgefort. I'm the founder and the director of Land+Civilization compositions based in Shenzhen and Hong Kong. I hope you enjoy things.
For the last 7 years, we've been working with Lola and alongside our local partner, Land+Civilization compositions in landscape projects all over the world.
And by now we are working on 4 different park projects in Shenzhen. The first is a forest park in Guangming. We're also designing one of the most central public spaces of Shanghai. We're also redesigning Shenzhen's main waterfront, Shenzhen Bay Park. And we are designing an upgrade for Lychee Park.
I'll start by walking you through our vision for this project. We started this by trying to understand the history of the area and how the city has grown and adapted and how it's approached closer to the river and that heritage. Then the question obviously becomes, as the city is starting to grow to the south, across the river, to the countryside, how do we think of this space? What should its character be as part of the city and as part of the world? So we start to think of how the fabric itself can change from a very urban fabric, very gridded, to something much more loose, like you would have in the countryside. But then we still want to give a framework to this, key corridors in key identified sort of industries and character, and a key loop for transportation and identity linking the city to the island. And then we have to think of it as a transitional urban system that allows this segue to happen in terms of the water, in terms of the open space, the fabric itself, and this all comes together into these series of principles. And then together you can see here in our master plan of how we think this can give a new identity and a series of key hubs and loops within the region as it extends to the south. Now, of course, the land use is associated with this as well. In the key corridors, we have more intensive land use that can allow more business opportunities and more density, as you can see here in the floor area ratio transition of how we focus more intensity towards the transit corridors in certain key areas. You can see how this, again, relates to the transport network, and we provide a new hub, a circular sort of system that links this new kind of tourist friendly area and natural area to some of the new hubs we propose, as well as smaller pedestrian and biking networks and train networks as well. The landscape transition also has much more of a strong ecological and natural system to the south, and key environmental corridors extend along to the north and allow for water systems to come in as well in those smaller areas. So what we see is how we can start to think of a new sort of experience that both supports tourism and the countryside, linking Lingpan and the kind of food industry together. Again, these 3 developmental axes, we think about them relating to notions of culture and the experiences of that, more of a business-centered opportunity, and more of an industrial area as well that relates to being productive, including food and agriculture. So looking at the cultural area, it's more about the street life, activities. We think of amphitheaters, we think of culture markets, even a heritage relating to industry, and a cultural hotel, all linked together in this corridor. You can see a flavor of it here, still a nice outdoor activity relating to the existing culture and providing new amenities as well. The business axis, a place for leisure, nature, and young business to start and still along a beautiful natural axis. You can see here with good transit, allowing people to move easily and still having new construction, but with respect of the heritage of the area. The industry area, thinking of logistics, exhibition, and market spaces to sell, to have R&D for agriculture, farms, restaurants, all together in one space. You can get a character of it here, some new vibrant spaces, but mixed in with some idea of heritage, of how we can relate to traditional ways of dealing with the landscape and farming. And then we think of this as a low volume public transit loop, and linking the island, linking back to the city in these hubs all together, bringing together the sports hall, the existing tower, the city exhibition hall, commerce center, and eco amusement park, all to in one easy loop to transition easily from one to the other. The loop station design, we think of as a key series of stations that can provide identity along the way, both formally as architectural elements, but also as hubs for the community to come together. And there's also service stations along the way to allow for a place to get to something to drink, like a tea, or to get information as you move through the space. Now, this loop, we really want to maintain a human scale to respect the urban reality, but to also respect the natural environment. So a sense of being able to feel very comfortable within a natural system or a more urban condition. And the Lingpan concept on the island is building on some of the existing villages themselves and how we can start to use the character that's already there and use that as something to drive the next phase. So we reprogram the Lingpan settlement and use different elements, buildings, forest, water, and fields as the character that both relates to the old, but provides a new vision for the area. And so we're learning from the traditional settlements and what has existed before and how it kind of has these offsets with a core area and a series of layers offsetting. And this develops into our 4 clusters. And you can see the kind of conceptual diagram of how this comes together in these loops and these key hubs along the way. In the core design framework, you can see here a bit in an iconic form about how we provide these key identity moments along the corridors and along the loops, and all tied in together to activate this area in terms of culture and nature history. Now, we have these key thematic routes, some going north and south, some east and west, that allow quick and easy connection within a more local character, but also connect back to the city and to distant places as well. And in the end, we're thinking about a notion of circular economy. How can this economy really be supportive? So the tourism can benefit the locals, and the locals can benefit from the tourism. So it's a self-sustaining, it provides business for the area, and it provides cultural experience for locals and for visitors. And this goal of this is to host an event and to stimulate kind of a synergy between the natural systems, the heritage, and the new business coming together to think of not just in terms of something as built, but as events. And the different interests in different developments. By this, we think it's not just about tourism or business, but how these things can coexist together and support each other to add mutual benefit to all. And we think of how we can phase this. And obviously this won't happen in one step. It will need to happen a point at a time. Here you can start to see the master plan where this all comes together, these ideas of these corridors and visions and gradients and forms, how it can start to look from the city to the landscape.
Now we're going to talk about the 4 clusters that we propose for the island. First, let's start with the cluster number 1, which is all about the coexistence with water. It's about the relationship of the ground and soil with the surrounding rivers. For this area, we propose a series of programming that complements the Wheeland Tower and generates a tension between the horizontal landscape and the verticality of the tower itself. Here, you can see that the main part of the program is this music theater that we're proposing. It's called the water theater because it has a direct relation with the river itself. And if we see the floor plan, it will give Qiong Lai 2 important venues, a main theater space with all of the standards of a contemporary theater, a secondary smaller space for different types of events, and other cultural programming that, as you can see in this diagram, overlaps with the river. It crosses the river and directs to the Wheeland Tower as a certain bow to the architectural element. In the image, you can see how it generates an iconic landscape that doesn't seek to overshadow the tower, but highlight it in a better way. In cluster number 2, it is about the coexistence with traditional architecture. It is reinterpretation of the conventional. We do this by generating this covered loop that entices different types of programming and through a series of buildings and courtyards that complement the two existing villages. Here in the floor plans, you see how we are designing very open spaces that seek to connect the different types of ambience that we have. Here you can see different buildings and how they relate to each other. And in this image, you'll see that our emphasis is about reinterpreting local culture in a contemporary manner. Then we have the third cluster, the coexistence with forest. It's about humans and nature and the relationship with nature. Here we're keeping these beautiful forests that exist in the area and complement them through a series of elevated and round walkways where you can connect with nature and enjoy the landscape. Here you can see how these winding paths connect different pavilions and elements that complement the experience and generate the feeling of a park. We have recreational pavilions, homestay, eco zones, and libraries. Here you can see that we're not trying to impose buildings on the landscapes, but create better and more beautiful open landscapes. And finally, cluster number 4 is about the coexistence with the farmland. It's about bringing tourism to agriculture so that they can learn and enjoy the current and new agriculture that will happen in Qiong Lai. Here you can see that we do this by designing a building and element that complements the existing road and then curves itself into the landscape so that visitors can actually see how agriculture is made. Here you can see the different types of programming that are again very open so that we always have direct visual towards the agriculture. And at the end of the day, what we want is to have a visitor experience that not only highlights tradition but also enjoys, let's say, the advances of new technology. Here you can see that the image shows a landscape that is very particular, that is iconic in itself, and that is complemented by this simple but elegant architecture.
If we look at the water system, we can make a division between river water and rainwater. They both have their own system that should be optimized for the high peaks that happen during the rainy season. Let's first look at the river water. For that we can zoom out. Extra capacity for buffering the high peaks is needed. And we can find that space both upstream and downstream in the natural floodplains in the agricultural areas. And therefore we propose not to find that space within the city limits and focus purely on water safety and use the natural dynamics of the water for ecological quality and use the infrastructural interventions for a new leisure network. In order to make the urban rainwater system as resilient as possible, we've looked at the natural topography and we reserved the lowest areas to temporarily store water during the rainy season. We connect this to the system of pipes and pumps that the city is already realizing. The effect is a meandering blue-green network that contrasts with the grid of the city. All in all, the diversity and the dynamics of the water network in the river, the canal and the urban areas is forming the basis of all public spaces and landscapes in this urban development. The canal north of the island will have a park-like atmosphere with a fairly steady water level. The new dike that's going to be constructed on the north side of this canal will be a backbone for new leisure activities, both on the land side and on the water side. On the south side of the island we have the river with its natural dynamics that will be used for its ecological potential. By creating slow gradients, we introduce different habitats for plants and animals. If we look at the island itself, we propose to have a productive landscape that is adapted to its local conditions. On the higher areas, we have a combination of fruit trees, nut trees, and livestock, creating a fairly dense and sheltered environment. On the middle ground, we see space for the traditional lean pan system, growing crops for the Sichuan kitchen. And in the lower areas, we see space for water-related productions such as rice fields and fish ponds. Altogether, these different productive landscapes create a wildly attractive variety of color, taste, and texture.
So what does all this mean? In the end, how do we make the semi-rural area of a self-sufficient city where new generations would like to stay? It's about coexistence, being together, about living and producing. The idea that we don't just make things over there and we live here, we mix it together. It's a shared experience, and this allows the city to evolve and change and become a truly identifiable, special place. So we can play, grow, make as one, layered together. How do we attract more young generations to develop a local industry in the future? The coexistence of tourism and local experience. Tourism doesn't need to just be a simple, silly thing that outsiders do. It can provide quality to the locals. It can embrace the reality of what is there and enhance the experience of the people on the ground, as well as giving a much more qualitative experience to those coming into the region. This again sets a tone for the evolution of Qiong Lai. And lastly, how to welcome a future development without losing local qualities and identities. That's because we don't need to remove the local heritage. We can actually mix the local existing character, both in terms of landscape and buildings, together and allow a new form to come to mingle and frame new spaces, places where people can meet that still show the heritage from the area, but also show a fresh take on that heritage and what it can be. And by allowing this coexistence, we can remember the past and respect it, but also use that past to look forward to the future, to bring forth a new regional identity that's still based on its roots and its core. And in the end, we see this as the Qionglai city evolution. Thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.